here. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, is this afternoon or morning? I'm losing. It's afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Didn't think we would ever get here, but here we are, finally. Tomorrow, the legislation that allows adult use recreational marijuana licensing that we've been working on for about a year and a half will be referred to the committee and begin its journey through the city council process of public discussion and public hearings. I respect the due diligence that my colleagues will provide every page of this particular document, as I would do the same. But I believe that what we are submitting is well thought out, respectful of the rights of all, and ensures that residents of Detroit, which has been disproportionately impacted by the war of drugs, has a fair chance at opportunities that the cannabis industry has to offer. Before I talk about what this ordinance will do, I want to talk about what this ordinance will not do. It will not solve all of our problems in the city of Detroit. That's what I keep hearing all around. The city has some systemic things that we've got to unwind just like other cities, and this is an industry that truly is in its infancy in Detroit, and we have to make sure that we nurture it properly to make sure that it grows strong, not reckless, and is a bridge to generational wealth that has been out of reach for so many families in our city. I'm proud of the work that the entire team who volunteered long hours, day and night, on this ordinance, from my office to the mayor's office to the law department to CREO to the legislative policy division. There was no shortage of great minds in the room, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment and your dedication. But I want to say my greatest level of appreciation for the members of the social equity work group and the committee chairs in particular. I believe some of them are here. I just want to recognize you by name. And if you are here, please raise your hand. Ahmed Muhammad, Bahia Lee, Ebony Smith, there she is, Mitzi Rodak, Tatiana Grant, and Stan Harris. And I want to thank each one of them for their bold, dedicated, persistent, focused, brilliant leadership as they poured their souls into making sure that the social equity portion of the ordinance fulfilled the spirit of the state law. Now, while you had the work group focus on the spirit of the law, and let me just tell you what the law says: to promote and encourage participation in the marijuana industry by people from communities that have been disproportionately impacted by marijuana prohibition and enforcement, and to positively impact those communities. You can find that language right there in the state website. That's for the media. While the work group worked on the spirit of the law, we had Attorney Kim James, doing a tremendous job in making sure that we stayed within the letter of the law. And we appreciate her reining us in when we had some very well-intentioned but issues that had already been litigated in case law. We think we went through, I believe it was about 20 or so versions of the draft ordinance, so it shows you the amount of push and pull that we had in this particular process. Also like to give a shout out to Mayor Duggan, who, if you recall, in February, he made a commitment and he agreed that 50% of licenses should go to Detroiters. That was a huge, huge, bold statement all the way back in February. The mayor also fought for hard to get clean slate bills passed, which, among other righteous things in it, the bills made it easier to expunge criminal records with marijuana convictions. The same plant that so many of our sons and daughters, mothers and fathers found themselves locked up in our city is the same plant that so many people are making a pretty decent lifestyle off of, with no fear of prosecution, because the laws are now finally catching up with common sense. And finally, there's no way that I could let this day go by without acknowledging the work put in this ordinance by my former staff member, my brother, DeAndre Watson. We lost DeAndre a few months ago, tragically and senselessly. This ordinance was DeAndre's baby, and he studied the law, and he used all of his gifts to steer this process, this ordinance process in our office with the excellence that only he could display. And I know that he would be proud as we stand here and present this historic legislation today, and it has his fingerprints all on it. So now let's talk about the ordinance. The ordinance provides the city to opt in to local licensing for all state-approved adult use categories. Those include adult use retailer establishment, grower, processor, safety compliance facility, temporary marijuana event, micro business, designated consumption lounge, and secure transporter. There will be a cap on certain licenses issued due to their hyper-competitive nature and the concerns of oversaturation, while others, there will be no limit. Throughout the city, the ordinance allows for 75 total retail establishments, which these are commonly known as dispensaries. Currently, there are about 45 medical facilities in the city of Detroit, medical marijuana facilities in the city of Detroit, and I'm sure each will be seeking one of these 75 licenses. We also are allowing 35 micro-business establishments, which allows for more homegrown operations with a smaller plant count, and they can sell plants or they can sell products only that it grows and processes within their own operation. The last cap license is for 35 designated consumption lounges, which are locations where patrons can safely and legally consume their cannabis. This is an attempt to address concerns that we have observed around the country where recreational marijuana has been legalized to curb use in public places, which is a violation of the law. The remaining licenses, as I mentioned, have no cap attached to them. Also written in the document social equity legislation is language which states that no less than 50% of all licenses are to be awarded to Detroiters. It also provides priority certification for residents as well. Now the question is, what is a Detroiter? That's what we talked about all the way back in November of last year. We know that the disproportionate prosecution and convictions of countless residents in the city of Detroit led to many of them serving several years incarcerated, and it also challenged their financial situation to the point where many families were forced to relocate, and in their response to their run-in with the unfair criminal justice system. So we know that many of them left the city over time, but many of them have come back. To qualify for the benefits being provided under the social equity program, you can do so in one of three ways. One, you must have lived in the city of Detroit for a minimum of 15 out of the last 30 years and be a resident of the city of Detroit for a year prior to submitting your application. Two, you must have lived in the city of Detroit for a minimum of 13 years out of the last 30, qualify for low income by at least the federal guidelines, and be a resident of the city of Detroit for at least a year prior to your application. And then the third leg of the stool, these are for those who have been previously incarcerated for marijuana-related offenses. You must have lived in the city of Detroit for 10 out of the last 30 years, and yet still, we want to make sure that you're a resident of the city of Detroit for at least a year prior to your application. We also know that while this industry can be very lucrative, it also requires a great amount of financial resources. We're in the process of identifying ways to pull together options for these types of resources that won't be predatory and take advantage of those that the program is actually intended to help. In the meantime, we have made a commitment to slash all local application fees for legacy Detroiters to 1% of the total cost. We listen to the professionals and advocates and believe that we have addressed a number of concerns that history and data has shown prevent success in the industry among residents who live in communities that have been subject to disproportionate marijuana convictions. The mayor and his team is working to ensure that we have the capacity to process applications and also the oversight. And he'll talk to you about the timelines that are being put in place for all licensing application, acceptance, and review. Lastly, as with any legislation that is put in place to provide equity in industries where it doesn't exist, I've already received emails and other forms of communication threatening lawsuits. We haven't even filed or had the introduction of this ordinance yet. We got folks who don't want to see equity in the place where residents live, where the industry is located. These folks who sent the communications, I'm sure they know that I'm a member of the Detroit City Council, but what they did not know is I'm also a member of Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. We are the oldest, the first intercollegiate Black Greek fraternity in the world. Founded in 1906, and some of our distinguished members include justice fighters like Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Justice Thurgood Marshall, Jesse Owens. In 1937, when our fraternity was going through some major challenges that threatened the actual organization, we had one of our founders stand up before the membership, and he said, in order to defeat these challenges, that we're going to fight until hell freezes over, and then we shall fight on the ice. So I'm letting Detroit know, everyone who's watching today, everyone who can hear me, you have recruited leadership that is not only willing, but also equipped to fight until hell freezes over. And then, if necessary, we shall fight on the ice to ensure that Detroiters have an opportunity for inclusion, equity, and making sure that we have ownership within this industry. Now, I want to thank you, and I want to bring forward Mayor Duggan, who has been an extreme partner in this process, and he's been supportive of not just our efforts in equity in cannabis, but if you look at his record, he's a champion for equity and equality throughout every industry in the city of Detroit. So without further ado, please welcome Mayor Mike Duggan.
Well, thank you, Council Member. What you're seeing today is the introduction of a major piece of legislation, and everything that's been accomplished in the city in the last 7 years has been because of the mayor and the council working together, but this is unique. Make no mistake, James Tate is the primary author of this ordinance with the assistance of all of the volunteers you heard from his Social Equity Council, and I'm glad he had the great assistance from Kim James and from Kim Rustum from my staff, but he came to me about a year ago and said, look, I know the people of this city want the opportunity to buy recreational marijuana, but I'm never going to let it happen if Detroiters are going to be excluded from ownership. Will you work with me on those principles? I said, boy, that is a legally tricky area, but I think we can do it, and I think the end result is far better because of that, and you're going to hear today from a coalition of folks who are behind it. Let me take you through the principles of what's there, and they should be attached to your pass-outs today. But here's why we're here. In November of 2018, the people of the state of Michigan legalized recreational marijuana. The people of the city of Detroit voted 69-31 to legalize it. And so I've heard from all 31% who voted no. They haven't changed their opinion. But I work for the people of the city, as does Councilmember Tate. And it's our responsibility to honor the will of the majority. And that means that the majority of people in this city want the ability to buy marijuana legally. And so we had to figure out an appropriate way to do that, whatever our own feelings had been. So that's our starting point. Here's the problem, that the ballot language was drafted and funded by some folks who were running medical marijuana establishments. But here's the first provision. It said each city could decide for itself whether to allow recreational marijuana businesses. So you've seen opt-outs and opt-ins, right? Some cities around here are selling. Detroit so far has not. And the reason is the second provision, and that is the ballot language said until December 21, the only way to get a license for recreational marijuana dispensary in Michigan was if you already had a license for a medical facility. That is, for 2 years, only the people who already had a medical facility could apply. Now, you can understand why those individuals would put that in there, but here's how it affected the city of Detroit. We have in this city 46 medical dispensaries operating today according to BC. That's what we have licensed, for the most part, operating lawfully. Of those, 42 are owned by people who live outside the city. 4 are owned by Detroiters. So had Detroit City Council opted in last year or earlier this year, it would have guaranteed that 90% plus of the ownership for the retail marijuana industry in the city would be locked in virtually forever to non-Detroiters. And Councilman Tate didn't think that was right, and I didn't think that was right. And so they stood up to a lot of pressure, saying, why aren't you allowing us to have dispensaries? And their point was, we're not going to have dispensaries as long as Detroiters are going to be locked out. And so Councilman Tate and I have been lobbying Andrew Brisboe, who's the executive director of the Michigan Medical Regulatory Agency for the state of Michigan. And we just said simply, you're going to get no licenses in the city of Detroit if Detroiters are going to be excluded. And I'm very pleased with the fact that Director Brisboe earlier this month rescinded the rule. He realized that it was not valid, and he rescinded it and said, okay, you can license new recreational dispensaries that aren't medical. At that point, Councilman Tate and our staffs and I basically went to work around the clock the last couple of weeks, because now we could actually do what we wanted, which is to guarantee Detroit ownership. And so when Mr. Brisboe reversed the rule, what he said is, starting March 1st, 2021, any city can approve recreational license without the preference. So that's what we're targeting. Post March 1, the city of Detroit can now act. So Councilman Tate has put forth an ordinance that has in it 5 principles. 1, Detroiters will get a minimum of 50% of all the new recreational marijuana licenses in the city. Detroiters are going to get our fair share. And here's how we're going to do it. As he said to you, there'll be licenses for up to 75 recreational dispensaries. But here's the rule. No license will be issued to anybody if it brings the number of licenses issued down below 50% Detroiters. So what that means is, if 10 Detroiters have a recreational license and 10 non-Detroiters have a license, and you come in the door as a non-Detroiter, you won't get licensed. But when the 11th Detroiter gets licensed, now the 11th non-Detroiter gets licensed. We don't want this industry to get built up and say, okay, we have 75 licenses, the 38 non-Detroiters all get open first, and the Detroiters come later. We are going to issue these licenses concurrently, so there is true equity. We welcome the investment of people outside this community. They have done enormous value for us. But those outside this community need to understand we are going to demand that there be equal equity for Detroiters. I know we've already seen legal challenges. I'm very confident of where we're going to stand in those legal challenges. And this is relatively simple. The city council vote to allow recreational dispensaries in Detroit is only valid if this 50-50 provision holds up. What Councilman Tate's ordinance says is, if that provision is struck down, the authorization is struck down. And so you're going to see a coalition of a whole lot of folks today who have made a decision that they are better off as a non-Detroiter to have a fair shot at 50% of the licenses than to push for 100% of 0 licenses, which was exactly what they were facing. And so what we're going to do is have first a 6-week exclusive licensing period for Detroiters, and then move on to others. What Councilmember Tate is proposing is that if there is city-owned land in areas that is properly zoned, that if you are a Detroit legacy applicant, you can buy that land at 25% of appraised value to give a jump start financially to our Detroiters, because we are trying to build wealth among business folks in this community. And we are going to work, and we've already started the conversation with philanthropy and other lenders, because in many cases, Detroiters don't have the same access to financing to start the businesses. We are going to do everything we can to create startup financing help to make sure that Detroiters compete on equal terms. That's all we want, is an equal shot. We get the Detroiters up and the non-Detroiters up, and then the best person succeeds. But there have been too many barriers that have kept Detroiters from even participating in the market. So what's a Detroit legacy applicant? Councilmember Tate just took you through this. You have to have lived in Detroit for 1 year at the time of your application, and you've been here for 15 of the last 30 years. You are really a Detroiter at your core. Or, under the social equity provisions of the state law, you could have lived here for 13 of the last 30 years and be low income, or 10 of the last 30 years and have a criminal record relative to marijuana. Now, you can be a legacy Detroit applicant if 51% of your company is owned by true legacy Detroiters. But if you try to come in under the 51% rule, there is going to be intense scrutiny by the Office of Civil Rights and Inclusion. There are going to be no straw man kind of arrangements. If you come in, you have to show that the company is truly owned and controlled 51% by Detroiters. We're going to look at where the source of money is. We're going to look at your underlying corporate documents. And if it is not a true ownership and control majority by Detroiters, we're going to reject you. We are. So anybody who has any idea that I'm going to get a friend and put him in, but they're not really going to run the company, you are going to be kicked out up front. And if you somehow slip by us, your license is going to be terminated. If you come in under the legacy category, you have to be run and owned truly by a Detroiter. So, if you want to get a legacy license, what do? One, you can start the state of Michigan pre-qualification process. They are going to start taking applicants December 1st. And so before you can come to the city, you have to first get your pre-qualification from the state. December 1st, I know it says today, but December 1st is the date the state is going to start accepting the pre-qualifications. Once you have your pre-qualification, starting February 1st, you can show up at the Civil Rights and Inclusion Office, Detroit CREO's office, and say, I am a legacy Detroiter. Here's my driver's license, here's my income tax payments, here's my voting record. You can prove you've been here 15 to 30 years and you've been here for the last year. And starting in February, CREO will certify you as a Detroit legacy applicant. April 1st, you can apply for your license. And May 1st, the exclusive window period for Detroit applicants start. So from May 1st to June 15th, we will only be processing applications from Detroit legacy applicants. Now, I have said we welcome investment from those outside the city. And so if you're not a Detroit legacy applicant, you still apply on April 1st. Of course, you're going to need your pre-qualification before that. If you are currently a medical marijuana license holder, starting June 16th, you can apply. So you're in the second window period. The opening window period is Detroiters. Second period is the existing medical marijuana providers. And then August 1st, all other applicants, if you don't have a medical marijuana license, can apply at that point. And so we feel like we have built this in a fair way to give Detroiters a fair chance to get up and running, but also to allow folks to invest from anywhere if they truly want to invest in the city of Detroit. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back to Councilmember Tate, but I want you to listen to the folks who have come up here. In other states in America, there have been terrible fights and terrible divisions. You're about to hear from representatives of the manufacturers, representatives of current medical operators, representatives of Detroit operators who want to get into the business. And Councilman Tate and I have had numerous meetings over the last week to say to everybody, everybody's welcome. We want to have a process that's fair. And I think you're going to be impressed that while this is the beginning of the process, this is the introduction, City Council in the course of this may amend this proposal, but I think you're going to be really impressed with the broad coalition. And with that, I'll turn it back to the architect of this coalition, Councilmember James Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So next up, we're going to have Lawrence Garcia. He's the Corporation Counsel. And then following that, we're going to have members of the work group and others who will benefit from this particular ordinance that we put in place. For Corporation Counsel, Lawrence Garcia.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilmember Tate. The law department has a unique charge. We represent the legislature, we represent the mayor's office, we represent the clerk, and so we have the opportunity to assist with a lot of legal services being provided to local government. And it's been our privilege to cooperate with the efforts that lead to this piece of legislation today. For a long time, law enforcement efforts around marijuana have had a long-term and adverse impact on Detroit and its residents. And this is particularly true for low-income and minority members of our community. They have been disproportionately arrested, charged, and convicted for marijuana-related offenses over the years. This was unfair, it was unequal, and it was wrong. Recognizing that, Michigan's legislature sought to correct for the mistake, and the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act mandates, it requires social equity. It calls for providing opportunities where folks can demonstrate that they belong in the class of people who've suffered because of these past mistakes. As a local government, we too see a compelling and urgent need to fix old mistakes by providing licensing opportunities to long-term Detroit residents, with a special focus on those long-term residents who are low income and who have been convicted of marijuana-related offenses. Now, a lot of people are very passionate about growing and selling marijuana. In fact, a lot of them are every bit as passionate about pot as some other people are passionate about carrying and owning guns. But right or wrong, the Constitution does not say anything about cannabis. People do not have a fundamental right to sell recreational marijuana in Detroit. It is a privilege, not a right. And the regulation we are aiming to create is designed to address past wrongs, and we're confident that it will withstand legal challenges. This is good policy to correct past mistakes, and we are looking to make good law. Thank you.
Y'all ain't clap for me, that's all right. Yeah, I noticed. Coming up next, I want to bring the members. Coming up next, I want to bring the members of the work group up forward. Mitzi, I saw you here, and I believe all of the members of the work group, social equity work group, please come forward. This is your chance to. You got beat up just like I did during this process, and I know that Abdullah wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to speak. You did mention that you wanted to speak first, so. Abdullah Muhammad, and then other members of the work group, if you have a few words that you also want to provide, this is your opportunity to do so.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank Councilman James Tate for his tireless service to the city of Detroit in helping craft this recreational cannabis ordinance over the past 12 plus months. Brother Tate, as he would tell you, is not personally a man of cannabis, and neither am I, but he is a man of service to the people and to this great city, and I thank him for all that he has done to help ensure Detroiters have a seat at the table and are able to build generational wealth in this multi-billion-dollar cannabis industry. I would also like to thank Mayor Duggan in his State of City address earlier this year in laying out the framework and defining what a legacy Detroiter should be, and ensuring a balance in licensing given to both legacy Detroit applicants as well as general applicants. Mayor Duggan has also consistently promoted both general and legacy Detroit applicants to form partnerships where possible, which I personally think is a brilliant idea if executed correctly, to help expedite the 46 plus currently operating medical dispensaries to gain quick access to the recreational cannabis licensing here in the city of Detroit. My name is Abdullah Muhammad, and I've been a Detroit resident for almost 25 years, moving here after graduating from the United States Military Academy of West Point in June of 1996. I volunteered for Councilman Tates' newly formed work group in January of this year. The work group consists of 5 committees: Detroit legacy definition, land, application, funding, and education. Detroit legacy definition, defining who in the city of Detroit should get priority in gaining access to one of the 10 possible licenses given by the city of Detroit. This committee is chaired by Ms. Ebony Smith, who also balances her time as a full-time nurse. I also co-chair this committee, and without question, this was the most difficult and contentious committee and task that we had to complete in trying to define what a legacy Detroiter should be. The Land Committee is chaired by Mitzi Rudock, who I have to say has been a true educator to all of us in the work group and others in the Metro Detroit area with her weekly informational calls and classes about the cannabis industry. The Application Committee, Mitzi also chairs this committee in creating specific components of the application needed to apply to the city in terms of gaining licenses through the ordinance. The 4th committee is Funding, which is chaired by Ms. Tatiana Grant. I don't know if she's here today, but Ms. Tatiana Grant is a marketing business guru and small business owner and has been instrumental in coming up with both private and public ways for Detroiters to get access to funding to start their cannabis businesses and resources needed to get into the industry. And last but not least, the Education Committee. This committee is chaired by Mr. Stan Harris and co-chaired by Ms. Baya Lee. Stan is a longtime personal friend of mine. He also runs and manages a very successful car dealership, while Baya Lee is a full-time nurse and graduate student taking classes, also volunteering countless hours to help develop a framework for how to educate and train legacy Detroit applicants, not just in cannabis, but also in the business tools needed to ensure long-lasting success after the businesses are open. There are also many, many people in the city of Detroit and around the country who volunteered for the work group. They contributed thousands of hours, thousands of meetings, not thousands of meetings, but dozens of meetings, I should say, both before COVID and also Zoom calls after COVID with the city of Detroit, emails, conference calls, researching other ordinances around the country, talking to funding groups, talking to Michigan State regulators to ensure that we were in compliance with state law and also the Constitution, all while holding down 40 and 50-hour-a-week full-time jobs outside of this work group. I'm truly thankful for being given the opportunity to serve the city in this work group capacity and helping frame the language of this ordinance. But most of all, I'm excited to see Detroit is finally given the opportunity to build wealth in an industry which, since the 1930s, has disproportionately impacted people of color around the country and in Detroit specifically. In speaking for the work group, I think we all would agree that although this ordinance is not perfect, it will establish a framework to allow legacy Detroiters a powerful seat at the table to build generational wealth in the cannabis industry and truly help lift those disproportionately impacted in the city of Detroit. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Latoya Rucker, and I'm a Detroiter. I was raised here in the city, and after college, I purchased my first home here. My partner and I, both legacy Detroiters, are currently opening a female cannabis cultivation and processing brand in the city of Detroit. Collexium is the name of our company. I love my city, and I am proud that Mayor Mike Duggan and Councilman Tates want to put Detroiters first with the adult use marijuana ordinance. I have been a cannabis caregiver since 2009 and anxiously awaiting the opportunity to be able to scale my business. I have a personal story. My grandmother suffered from chronic pain most of her life, and my family and I wanted to see if cannabis could be a better solution for her. Turns out it was. It improved her quality of life. And though she is no longer here, I am sure she's looking down smiling, knowing that I'll be taking part in an industry in her hometown doing what I love. Our communities can be revitalized, jobs will be created, and businesses and lives will change for the better. At Collexium, we are committed to being a part of Detroit's future in the cannabis industry. Thank you.
What up, though? In 1937, when Harry Anslinger led our country into marijuana prohibition, he did so using racist propaganda and rhetoric to demonize a plant. This racist legacy and propaganda continues to disproportionately harm our community. Detroiters, I understand why some of you don't trust this industry. We fear unjust criminalization. We worry about increased unemployment due to drug testing. Some of us just don't like the smell. And when we see so few of us, 4, actually owning the licensed businesses that are popping up in our neighborhood, why would we believe in a promise of equity? But today, I ask us to think about what stories we want to hear about Detroit and cannabis. And I can start with my own. I'm Jass Jackson. I'm a legacy Detroiter, born in Hutzel Hospital and raised on the southwest side of Detroit, right on Vernon and Campbell. I graduated top of my class from Western International High School and attended the University of Michigan on a full tuition scholarship founded and sponsored by the Detroit Regional Chamber. I hold 2 professional degrees, a master's degree in education and business administration, and am applying to law school this spring. My father graduated from Renaissance High School, my mother works for Matrix Human Services, and my grandmother is a proud retired educator and principal with DPS-CD. Detroit, I am part of your legacy. And since the passing of the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, my wife and I have opened our home on the northwest side of Detroit, go District 2, to the cannabis community. We launched Detroit's first bud and breakfast listing as a prototype. We wanted to learn about cannabis consumers and the industry in the comfort of our home, and since we opened our doors, we have hosted over 250 guests. Plus, in addition to our bud and breakfast, my wife and I took huge personal risk and transitioned our careers into cannabis. We truly believe in a new story, a new rhetoric. Now Cara, my wife, is a cultivator at a large vertically integrated grow, and I co-own a cannabis content marketing agency called Loud Social that specializes in cannabis content creation. And while I love the community we are forming, the connections we have made, and the space we are able to hold in community, I'm still nowhere near what I need in order to cover the startup costs to launch a licensed cannabis business. And let me tell you why that matters. I recently watched a promotional video of a large cannabis conglomerate in Michigan, one I'm sure already has access to or will have access to the Detroit market. Their projection for the year is 30,000 pounds of cannabis. And with a market rate of about $4,500 per pound, they're projecting $135 million in revenue. Now, industry folk, that's amazing. And as a cannabis entrepreneur and aspiring licensee holder, those numbers excite me. But do you know how many of my Detroit tribe I could pay with those figures? How many small businesses I could invest in Detroit with those numbers? Should this conglomerate and the few others like it be the only ones who profit and win big in this industry? Detroit, when we open our doors to an adult use market, we create opportunity for us. And that's the story I want to tell. That Detroit got it right. That we generated the necessary capital to sustain an equitable adult use industry, and we created opportunity for legacy Detroiters to compete and thrive. Detroiters, Let's focus on a news story, one that centers us in it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Detroit. First, let me recognize Councilman Tate for all his hard work and efforts on this. I know firsthand all this year how much work has gone into this. Also to Mayor Duggan for his commitment, not just to this ordinance, but also to social justice and economic equity in the city of Detroit. My name is Maurice Morton, and I'm a current medical marijuana owner here in the city of Detroit at Motor City Kush. And let me tell you why we support, along with the other black cannabis owners of the city of Detroit who I see present here, this particular ordinance. One, as an attorney, a lifelong attorney and Detroiter, I saw firsthand many, many years, 90% of those convicted of marijuana-related offenses coming through our courts were black men. But yet, and that stat is true nationally in urban areas, but yet fewer than 3% of all cannabis-related businesses are minority-owned throughout this nation. This ordinance is important to promote diversity, inclusion, and to help get others involved in this industry. We all know the cannabis industry is no different than the IT boom from 20, 30 years ago. It is thriving. It is booming, and there is a lot of wealth and potential equity for those involved. So we support this from an equity standpoint. We hope that this ordinance will bring about the much-needed diversity, not just here in the city of Detroit, but in the state of Michigan. Because the shame of it all is, despite the 43 or 45 currently open medical marijuana facilities, there are only 5 African-American owned dispensaries that are operating in the city of Detroit today. We cannot let that continue. We cannot support that. We cannot allow that to continue to happen because this is all of our city. We have to make sure that diversity is promoted, it's important, and we feel that this ordinance does that. Thank you.
I'm assuming I'm the only Youper in the crowd today. I don't, if anybody else is from the UP or not, you can raise your hand and give me some support. But I'd like to thank the Mayor Duggan for the opportunity to speak today, as well as Councilman Tate. My name is Jim Laporte, and I'm the current treasurer of the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association. And I'm also vice president of High Life Farms, located up in Chesaning, Michigan. The MCMA represents the largest amount of investments in cannabis in the Michigan industry. I am also the association's representative on the Marijuana Regulatory Agency's Social Equity Committee. As a proud Native American, this is a very exciting day for me. I know a thing or two about finding opportunity in otherwise disadvantaged communities. I've experienced it firsthand with the emergence of Michigan's casino industry. And thanks to available training program, thousands of Native Americans have launched successful careers in Michigan's expansive gaming industry. The same can be accomplished with the city's proposed plan to remove barriers to enter Michigan's adult use market. As a leader in promoting social equity, our association applauds the mayor and Councilman Tate and the balance of the city council members for taking this bold step towards allowing our industry to thrive and operate in Detroit. This proposal opens up new opportunities for entrepreneurship, thousands of new jobs, and millions of dollars of new investment in the city, and will also serve to reduce crime by putting pressure on the illicit market. It also helps level the playing field for Detroiters with aspirations of starting businesses in this rapidly growing industry. It's also good for Michigan's cannabis industry as a whole. By encouraging participation in the adult use cannabis industry, this proposal supports a regulated market that ensures safe, tested, and high-quality cannabis products for all Michiganders. Our association stands ready to mentor entrepreneurs in the city who want to enter the cannabis industry. And we're eager to work with Mayor Duggan, Councilman Tate, and the balance of the council to create training programs to help Detroiters succeed in this business. Michigan's adult use cannabis industry needs places to grow. And there's no better place than the Motor City, our state's largest city, to do just that. It's a win for Detroit, it's a win for Michigan, and a win for our state's economic resurgence. Thank you.
All right. Anybody from the media have any questions? Sir.
So is there going to be a limit to the number of licenses that Detroit's going to allow?
Yep, so there's a cap on 3 different licenses. One is the retail license, and that's at 75%. 75 licenses, my apologies. The other is for the designated consumption lounges. That's 35 of those. And then also for micro business, there's 35 licenses available for that. The rest of them have no cap. I don't care. I can hear you.
Can
Hello?
you hear me? Okay, I have a few questions. For one, did you specify how this new law, if it's approved, would affect people who are already operating? Somebody who has a marijuana facility for medical purposes. Are they kind of grandfathered in to the old way, or how does that work?
Yeah, there's no grandfathering in our ordinance. What will take place is there's going to be a very rigorous process that goes through applications and ensures that everything that someone says on a piece of paper is actually something that they have the ability to do and is doing. In the process of understanding we have 75 ordinances, 75 licenses, 45 businesses currently established. That means that if we have 50% of those businesses that will, 50% of those 75 licenses, that means that some of the businesses are going to have to partner with legacy Detroiters in order to stay in business. And as the mayor mentioned, it makes a whole lot, it makes a whole lot more sense, as the mayor said, for 49% of a business or 100% of nothing.
Councilman, doesn't need me to do anything, but if I understood your question, if you have a medical license today, you keep operating on that medical license. What's being announced today are new recreational licenses.
Right, and I didn't know if he was saying that it applies to the people who had medical. So they're not involved in this, it's all separate.
Unless they apply for recreational.
Unless they
So
apply for
these are
both.
two separate
Okay.
licenses,
I
yes.
I know they're separate licenses, I just didn't know if they fall subject to that. So, separately, you guys talked about looking at ways to fund, maybe some assistance programs, right, and getting together with philanthropic. Can you talk about where that stands? And I know that some groups have come forward proposing things. Hey, we'll kick in $2 million for a program, but they had said the city didn't want to, move forward with that. Where does this stand for you guys, and why haven't you accepted some of the recommendations brought up by others?
Yes, I'm not familiar with whatever that proposal is, but we are taking in all proposals right now and evaluating how we can absolutely provide the opportunity for Detroiters to increase the availability of resources. So no, I'm not familiar with that particular
Okay.
one.
I had another question, but I think it's in my notes, so I'll have to go look.
I'm here. Anyone else? All right. Oh,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Darren Wheeler. Unfortunately, I'm part of the negative side of this situation where I've been to prison for marijuana. So my question is for those of us or those that are out there who have those convictions on their situation but want to be part of this new ordinance, how is that going to work for them?
So the good news is, one, in terms of residency, you don't have to have as long of a time here in the city of Detroit, because we know that for many who are incarcerated for marijuana-related offenses, there was some time that you had to spend away from Detroit in prison. And so what we're looking at, again, just like everyone else, whether you're so low income within the legacy program, social equity program, we're going to make sure that we find dollars to assist you. But right now, we don't have all of those components put together, and we're going to walk through it with you as well. We're, in addition to that, looking at programs to help educate Detroiters, legacy Detroiters in this business. I can tell you that I've received countless emails, countless conversations I've had with Detroiters who are interested, who are thinking about it, but have no idea on what the first step, second step, third step is. So we're working on identifying ways to educate Detroiters as well. And I just want to say to Detroiters, be very, very cautious when you have your certification, your legacy Detroiter certification, because you're going to be a hot commodity. And the last thing you want to do is make a bad deal with a predator who's going to take advantage of you, because as indicated, the mayor said, we're going to be going through all of those documents to ensure that everything is level up, but you still have the ability to make a bad deal. So we want to make sure that we educate, do the best we can to educate collectively everyone who's looking to get into this industry, because it is very lucrative, but it's also full of good people and those who are not necessarily have your best interest at heart.
So my question is, for an individual who has a felony on their record for it, will they be allowed to
Yes.
sue?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Now, my other question is, I'm all for recycling our money in our communities. Of these resources that you've talked about that you're trying to get the finances from, has anybody reached out to any black banks?
We've reached out to several locations, let me just put it that way, without saying who and what.
Okay, I'm just asking because that's part of keeping
There's
the money
only one here
keeping the money in
locally
the
in
community.
Detroit.
So, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Besides the 25% discount on land, did you say that there was discounts offered for like some of the other fees associated?
Yeah, 1% off of application fees for,
1%?
yeah, 1%. There will be 1% only charge for legacy Detroiters. It's a major, major benefit.
That's city application.
Yes, sir, we don't have anything to do with the state. It's all local. You gotta talk to your state legislators about that. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you being here.